Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 18th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. The first item I have on the agenda tonight is the adoption of the minutes of the public hearing September 6, 2017. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favour? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The second item I have is the minutes of the council meeting held September 6, 2017. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favour? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And the next item, I need a recommendation from council that the September 18th agenda be approved. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. All those in favour? Thank you. And I'd like to point out that this evening, unfortunately, Councillor Salter won't be with us. She's not feeling very well. We have 3 delegations tonight, and the first delegation is ready to go. Staff Sergeant Marc Pelletier, and it's a presentation on the 2017 year-to-date incident statistics. Staff Sergeant, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. So this evening I brought along the Mayor's report and the top 20 calls for service, and I think you have a copy of all that. So just looking at the graph, which would be the top 20 calls for service, our number 1 call here in the Oceanside area is for traffic complaints. That's 874 calls so far for traffic. The issue that we have here at the Oceanside Detachment is we only have 1 member. So this is what we want to try to get, a second traffic member to help out with that. We just can't keep up with the amount of calls that we're getting for traffic with only 1 member. He's got days off, he's got holidays, courses, etc. So that's the number 1 issue right now. We really want to get onto the traffic. Like, we have no time for the speeders in town here, so I really want to harp on that. So, and then if we look over at the chart where we have the break and enter business, which has more or less been the same since 2015. Break and enter residences, it's gone down from 2016. But the theft from motor vehicle, you saw in 2015 there was 100 theft from motor vehicles, 2016 94, and we've dropped it down to 79. And one of the reasons for that, if you look at the last sheet I have on there, is the curfew check. So our job right now is that I've instilled on all the members in the offices. We have prolific offenders in town that thought that they could come here to Parksville and have free reign in the town. That does not happen anymore. We will check these guys multiple times a night to make sure they're abiding by their probation orders, they're undertaking their recog that they were put on by the courts. So if he's got a 10 o'clock curfew, he cannot leave his residence and think that he can go out and steal it from your car at 2 in the morning, because we're checking them constantly. So if we look at the curfew checks I got here last September, so October, November, December, we did 673 curfew checks for 2016, and right now we're at 2,165 curfew checks for this year. So what has happened here, these prolific offenders do not like getting checked, so they either get arrested, they leave town, or they go to jail. Bottom line. I don't have time for that. These guys are breaking into the citizens' vehicles, they're breaking into your homes, and they're stealing left, right, and center. When I say a prolific offender, that's a person that has more than 10 criminal code convictions, and he's on all these undertakings and probation orders. These are guys that are in town here, and we want them out of town. So I will do everything I can legally to remove him from the city of Parksville. So 1 prolific offender, keep in mind that if you go 20%, they do 80% of the crime, those prolific offenders. 1 prolific offender driving around in his little BMX bike will break into easily 20 to 30 vehicles a night.
Is that the end of your presentation?
No, I just want to,
okay.
Basically.
You want a question? You want to ask a question? Councillor Powell has a question.
Thank you, Worship. And so are the ones that you're doing the curfew check, are any of those young offenders?
There are young offenders, but on average, they're in that 20 to 35 age group.
Okay, thanks.
And the other that you'll notice is the mischief to business We had 21 calls for mischief in 2015. We're at 126 for this year. And the reason behind that is we have a lot of transient people that came through, and we needed to get on them right away. Because those were the people that were already causing, setting up in front of the business, spray painting, garbage. It was nonstop until we were able to get onto them. And that's the same thing for the camps. Once we found out where a camp was, we needed to know who those people were and what they were up to. And if they were prolific offenders because they just came from town, I checked a lot of people. I was working on bike patrol. And this summer, you would be surprised at how many people are from Victoria, North Vancouver, Lower East Side, all coming to Parksville because all they've heard it's a great place to be and the police don't bother you. Well, that stopped. So,
We're a great place to be, but not for thieves and
exactly.
pilfers.
That's basically it, Your Honor.
Councillor Burton.
So as a result of your curfew checks and checking on the encampments, has there been a reduction in homeless camps?
The homeless camps that we saw near the beach, we're unable to find them anymore. If they're hiding farther up, and we don't know about it. They're hiding farther up off Despard or in the bush somewhere there. But we're not seeing them down so much in the parks and down by the beach. I know that Deb came with a couple of workers. It was atrocious down to the beach. I can't remember how many needles they picked up, but there was garbage from everywhere. There was stuff from theft from vehicles that were just thrown around all over the place. It was disgusting.
Any further questions for Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for your presentation. As I just passed my phone over with some pictures this morning, that I came into my business and had my dumpsters all tagged, and they've immediately been washed because they've been sprayed with a kind of I'm not sure what it's called, but it helps to remove paint and everything off of metal. And so it's not going away, unfortunately, but it's one of those things that you have to make sure that it's taken care of immediately.
And, Your Honor, I want to mention one thing. The City of Parksville has been amazing. When we call about it in a camp, they will send vehicles down there and we'll pick that garbage up within the hour.
Exactly.
It's great.
We also have a hazmat company that picks up stuff that an ordinary worker shouldn't be picking up for fear of getting injected with a needle or what have you. Councillor Beale and then Councillor Burton. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Patterson, continue, then Councillor Beale.
Yeah,
Councillor Burton.
One other little comment, and that's we've talked a little bit about drop sites for needles and things like that, but from someone who's I'm a diabetic, so I have insulin shots 2 to 3 times a day that I carry around a little container for my needles for disposal. But there are people in the community in that too that can use those needle sites and that for safe, but not necessarily in the illegal type world of needle dispensing.
Councillor Beale and then Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciated knowing about the bike patrols, and I'm wondering if bike patrols are going to continue into the fall for any time at all?
As best we can. We'll try to get the bikes out as best we can. It's great. When it's great out there down at the beach in the downtown core, it's awesome.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Worship. With regard to the traffic calls, what are we getting? Mostly complaints about speeding. So if we were looking seriously at more traffic calming measures, that may reduce some of that?
That's correct. If we could have like a team of traffic members dedicated just to strictly doing the traffic enforcement, just for the speeders, just on the highway that are coming through town, it would be tremendous. You would see an automatic result. It wouldn't take that long. You hand out 50 tickets, word gets around pretty quick.
Or if we change the structure of the highway, would that?
That's out of my hands. That's Minister
I know that. I'm just asking.
Any further questions from members of council? I just wanted to point out, Councillor Patterson, go ahead.
Not necessarily questions or anything. I just wanted to mention that Tour de Rock will be coming through our community, and that the 26th, 28th, and that. So just kudos and that as well. Thank you.
I would imagine that in the with the coming fall and winter, things tend to settle down a bit.
That's correct.
Yeah, and we're going to have a cold weather shelter. Luckily, this winter, that's been organized by the SOS and Forward House and our friends at Island Crisis Center. So we've got that under control. That'll be a good thing. And we're also looking at the needle deposits. The staff are looking at areas. We've got the equipment to install. We're looking at where it should be installed. I would imagine you'll be consulted on that.
That would be great.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for all you do, and keep on keeping on. You know, it's a great idea to let people know that they're not welcome if they're here to steal and to cause mischief. So thank you very much. Be safe out there. Okay. The next delegation is Mr. Mike Cooper. Mike, you want to come to the microphone? Mike is President and CEO of the Nanaimo Airport Commission. And we've asked Mike to come tonight because we're going to a Union of British Columbia Municipalities conference next week. And on the agenda is the privatization of airports that we'll be discussing. So Mike, we're delighted you've chosen to come here all the way from the Nanaimo Airport. You didn't fly, did you? No. No airports in Park. Well, there's an airport in Qualicum Beach. But thanks again for coming. Really appreciate it. And we'll turn the floor over to you. And looking forward to hearing from you on airport privatization.
Thank you, Your Worship. And our pleasure to come here. Councillors, thank you for having us. The presentation I've got is a number of slides, and it's a bit of a complex issue, but I'm going to speak to the slides rather than read them out, and I'm going to summarize them, so I'll go through it fairly quickly here. The Nanaimo Airport is a 500-acre site. It is between Ladysmith and Nanaimo, and we've extended the runway to 6,600 feet, so we have the capability of hosting 737s that can make it to Hawaii, Mexico, and the Caribbean. And so we're growing the airport, and as we go into the future, we're growing it along with a number of other airports on Vancouver Island. And we need it all. We're on a rock, so we need to have float planes and airports and fast ferries and vehicle passenger ferries to keep the economic engine going for Vancouver Island. We service the area from Cobble Hill to Qualicum, and we overlap in our service area with Comox and other airports. But it's a good overlap, and it's a process where we knit these different airports and systems together, and that happens across Canada. The big challenge is, as we look forward, is that airports are capital intensive. For the 6,600-foot runway, it would cost about $40 to $45 million to put that in now. So they're very capital intensive when you're working on an airport. The terminal building expansion that we're currently undergoing is a 20-year expansion program, and it's $54 million. So we're going to be well into over $100 million of expansion requirements as we look into the coming years. This affects how airports are run, and we have to look at the best way to manage the airport so that we can have a revenue stream coming in. And it's really what the governments are looking at the local and federal level. They're looking at new airport models, and this will look at ownership and governance that shifts to more of a business strategy. The drive to increase revenue streams has also created opportunities, and there are now more than 60 businesses around the world who focus on airport investments. So this capital-intensive program is a challenge everywhere in the world. The investment opportunities grew from the challenges of the recession in the 80s in Canada, where a number of airports were losing significant monies. They were actually cost centers instead of profit centers. And that really drove some of the first decisions to look at how the airports were structured. It's a global trend In fact, as I've said, the issue of capital-intensive programs is around the world, and we have a number of airports that are privatized, but it's really a public-private partnership more than it is a private airport itself. In the United States, the world's largest airport operator, and in the United Kingdom, the world's largest airport operator, whose capital is now closed, is owned by an international consortium. So you're even seeing different groups coming together to run these airports and own several of them. Privatization focuses mainly on ownership and involves the transfer of control from public sector to private sector. Corporatization is another component of privatizing, where you keep it in the public arena, but it becomes a corporate type of entity, and they run it more like a business than as a service, and that helps with that revenue stream. Many corporatized airports, such as airports, Fraport, Schiphol Group, are not strictly speaking private because they are owned by their federal governments and operated by the partnership. Among the top 30 busiest airports in the world, only 3 can really be considered as privately owned. In Rome, Sydney, and London. 8 are under strict public-private partnerships. 19 are under public ownerships, but with some degree of private sector involvement. And only 1 U.S. airport in the group can be considered public-private partnerships, and that's the JFK. Generally speaking, governments hesitate to completely let go of strategic assets such as airports. The Canadian model includes airport privatization policy that was established in the late 80s. Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Montreal were the first airports to be privatized under the Airport Transfer Act. In fact, Nanaimo Airport was also. But the difference is that the Vancouver airport is still owned by the federal government, and then it's run by a not-for-profit, a standalone not-for-profit. The Nanaimo Airport was under that model from 1992 to 1996, and then the federal government came out and offered to sell it to the not-for-profit commission, the Nanaimo Airport Commission, and we now own it fee simple. But there's not very many airports in Canada that are owned that way. Most of them are owned, the larger ones like Victoria, Vancouver, are owned by the federal government and operated by a standalone not-for-profit society. It's an airport authority. In places like Abbotsford, the municipality took ownership, so they hold the title, I believe, in places like Abbotsford, not the federal government. But there's very few that are actually privatized the way Nanaimo Airport is. The Canadian system is the only one based on not-for-profit corporations. Canadian airport authorities are non-share capital corporations incorporated under Part 2 of the Canada Corporations Act. They do not pay dividends but pay rent to the government, and that's airports such as Vancouver. All profits are reinvested, and that's true also of the Nanaimo Airport. Everything that we do goes back into the airport that the monies are raised from. And that's one of the dangers that we could get into if we privatize to the level that some of the groups are talking about at this stage. Main sources of funds are cash flow from the operations, airport improvement fees, and debt instruments. Government grants for infrastructure are exceptional, but we use those. For us, in the Nanaimo Airport, for example, it's so capital intensive that if we didn't pull on the Island Coastal Economic Trust Fund, the Airport Capital Assistance Program, Building Canada Fund, if we didn't partner with those groups, we wouldn't be able to handle the capital the heavy capital intensity. And the reason that it's okay that airports do that is that they're also economic engines. By 2020, we will generate just under 2,000 jobs per year, direct and indirect, and about $358 million to the regional economy, direct and indirect. So any of the transportation hubs are truly economic engines for the region. On the governance side, the board of directors are named and proposed with nominating entities that are specified in the lease. We have a transfer agreement that we have from the federal government, and we have entities that are on our board. The entities are the Regional District of Nanaimo, the Cowichan Valley Regional District, the City of Nanaimo, the Town of Ladysmith, and the Chamber of Commerce. We have 4 other members on our board that are from the communities at large, and that ranges from everywhere from Oceanside to Gabriel Island. Strict governance and transparency rules set out in the ground lease and corporate documents include such features as the airport authorities must publish an annual report and hold a public annual meeting, which we do. On government oversight, prices are not subject to an external review, approval, or appeal process. So we can set our prices, but we have to meet the market and society's needs. Obligation to publish price changes for 60 days in advance with prior consultations is true in some cases. Transport Canada may at any time audit records procedures to ensure compliance with the ground lease. Airport authorities are subject to independent performance reviews every 5 years, and they must comply with all applicable laws and regulations. So the results. The Canadian model actually works very well, the current Canadian model. Major Canadian airports rank among the best. They are efficient with infrastructures that are well maintained and regularly upgraded. Most airports are 100% common use for improved utilization, and financing is simple, and expansion projects are tied to community needs, not to government agendas. Community involvement at that level is a plus. So the current model works very well. In fact, the Americans are looking at the Canadian model in a number of areas, including the NAV Canada airspace models. The issues and potential for change includes that February 2017 report from C.D. Howe Institute suggested Canada should sell its 8 largest airports to raise between $7.2 billion and $16.6 billion for infrastructure investments, and they would be investments away from the airport environment. Industry representatives have voiced concern that by having a private operator, 2 things may happen. The cost of travel could go up to add room for the profit margin, and the communities could have a smaller voice in the operations. I grew up on a farm, and we always thought we should keep the bottomlands. In my mind, the airports are the bottomlands. It's what you keep for the long term, and work with public-private partnerships to enhance the experience, keep the cost under control, and keep the efficiencies and safety at a maximum. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Mike. You've given us a lot to think about. Members of council, do you have any questions for Mr. Hooper? My overall question, I guess, Mike, would be that from what you've told us, the results of privatization would end up costing us more money.
There's a possibility. My experience is in the forest industry, when we privatized different aspects, when we did different modeled shifts, sometimes the operating monies get siphoned off for other reasons than for the airport. The current model has the monies come back into, at least in the Nanaimo Airport, back into the airport itself. And I think that's very important, that the monies come back into the transportation hub that the monies are raised from.
Because those costs, they're like long-term infrastructure costs. They're not going down. They're going to be forever going up.
They are. That's very true.
Okay. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. I really don't have any expertise in this area, nor have I read a lot, so I don't know about all the oversights in place, but is there at all a concern that with privatization it could be open to foreign ownership and, you know, potential concerns for our nation's security and otherwise?
I don't think it would be a security issue because there'd be enough regulations in place, but for sure there would be a potential for foreign ownership because that's happening in other places of the world, but it'd be an evolutionary process to get there.
Which again goes back to that concern that it gets farther and farther away from the communities that are being served.
That's one of the risks, and I'm no expert on this either. This is a new sort of focus that the governments are putting on, but the mayor asked me to speak on it, and I'm hoping I haven't led you too far astray. I'm not going to UBCM, but I'll see you at Bahia for sure. Take care. Have a good night.
Our third delegation this evening is probably a big surprise to a lot of you sitting here. It's all about pickleball and requests for pickleball courts. So it's Tom. Who's Tom? You're Tom, and who's I forget the name of your... Welcome, and you've got 10 minutes, and we want to hear all about pickleball courts, and I'm sure that you've got lots of support.
Said our name. Thank you, Your Worship, and council members. We are representing the pickleball community of Oceanside, not just our individual club. Introduction. The true measure of one's quality of life is their health. Pickleball is the fastest growing sport in North America because it is an easy sport to learn, children, adults, and even me. An excellent source of physical activity, affordable, only need a paddle, a ball, and of course a court to play on. Fun which keeps people coming back for more, an opportunity for social interaction, and it promotes healthy lifestyles. Our proposal is to have 8 dedicated pickleball courts built in Parksville, providing an increased opportunity to enhance the quality of life for its residents. The background. According to the 2017 RDN research report that just came back, 11% of the household members have played tennis, and Parksville has 12 dedicated tennis courts. 10% of the household members have played pickleball, and Parksville has 0 dedicated pickleball courts. Number of players. 2014, there were 6,900 pickleball players in BC. In 2015, this number grew by almost 40% to 9,500. Oceanside alone has approximately 900 active pickleball players. Number of venues/courts. In 2014, there were 106 places to play in BC. 2015, there were 128 venues for a total of 485 courts in BC. And again, these numbers have increased. Nationally, the numbers are stunning. In 2011, there were 6,000 pickleball players in Canada. In 2015, numbers more than tripled to 20,000. North American estimates for 2015 were 250,000 players, 10,000 courts, and 3,500 venues. In 5 years, OPC, which is OPC Pickleball Club, we started with 25 initial members in the club, and now we are a club of 170 with members as far away as Arizona. OPC had 200 drop-in visits throughout the 2017 summer season. That's people that have come in as tourists and want to join us. $4 they're allowed to play. Pickleball now is being played all over Vancouver Island. The nearest dedicated pickleball courts are 32 kilometers away, which is in Nanaimo. Dedicated pickleball courts on Vancouver Island are now available in Victoria, Lake Cowichan, Nanaimo, Port Alberni. The picture shown here is of the new Nanaimo courts. And again, there are no dedicated ones in Parksville. Facilities currently used for pickleball in the Parksville Community Park are marked for multi-sports usage, and the playing surface pictured above shows a dire need of repair and a truly safety concern. What's happening here is the roots are undergrowing there, and there's sinkholes now developing there. Looking forward, future trends and emerging activities support the continuing growth and demand for pickleball. The baby boomers are remaining more physically active in their retirement years than previous generations, providing an active opportunity for children, adults, and seniors who will enhance our community's overall quality of life. And the attachments are the RDN research study that back these facts up. Trends. Sports tourism is the fastest growing segment in the tourist industry. Sports tourism is thriving in Parksville. The second annual Oceanside Pickleball Tournament attracted 144 players, and with the majority coming beyond our community. People are purchasing homes based on available pickleball facilities. This was backed by one of our realtors who told us that. The top 3 activities as voted by BC in the Privatization 150 playlist was hiking was first, pickleball was second, and biking was third. Pickleball is now an event at the BC Senior Games. We've just recently received a couple letters of support from Michelle Stillwell, MLA, and also from Aerosmith Tennis Club. I'd like to just take a few highlights of those, if I may. This is from Michelle Stillwell. She got some of these facts. We didn't give her these facts. She got them because we applied for a DFIB from the government, which we received, and we used that DFIB, and it's available for the public down at the tennis courts. This is again from Michelle Stillwell, MLA. Healthy, active living is an instrumental place in making Parksville not only a great place to live, but a great tourist destination. With pickleball becoming one of the fastest growing sports in North America, it would be a great asset for the community to have assigned pickleball courts to accommodate the growing number of players while attracting visitors who play regularly south of the border. I wish the OPC Pickleball Club all the success to obtain pickleball-specific courts that will increase healthy, active living in the community with the sports and recreations for all ages and abilities. The next one again, which is kind of nice getting it from the tennis club, because we always had controversy before because we were using their courts. And so gladly they're saying, hey, we're glad to get rid of you if that happens. Again, this is from the Aerosmith Tennis Club. The Aerosmith Tennis Club provides squeegees and court rollers to its members to remove water from the tennis courts in the winter. A similar thing could be done by the OPC, which would allow the new permanent pickleball courts to be used all year round, and this would greatly relieve the overcrowding of the current indoor pickleball facilities during the winter months. We never thought of that, and we thought it was a great additional. In summary, we believe the proposed new pickleball courts will be used by both young and old residents and visitors to our city, and we urge the council to approve their construction. That was just the ones that came in the last day. Access currently restrictive. No dedicated pickleball courts. OPC and other clubs, we put up temporary nets every day when we play, and then each day when they're taken down and stored, the public can't have access to the use of the lines and that, so it kind of restricts it in that case. But permanent ones, the nets are always up there, so we're okay. The deteriorating surface keeps the more cautious players away. We do have a SWOT in the back, but it took a summary of that, the strengths and weaknesses. The strengths, inexpensive and suitable for all ages. Dedicated courts mean access for everyone, fun, social, easy to learn. Weaknesses, current courts, lacrosse box, and tennis courts are unsafe, slippery, uneven, and cracked. Little opportunity for youth and working folks to participate because we take the nets down after we're finished. Opportunities and threats, again, we're just taking a few of them. Opportunities allows us partnerships with Chamber of Commerce, RDN, City of Parksville, Vancouver Island Pickleball Association, School District 69, other businesses, OPC Pickleball Club, and other pickleball clubs. It also has, we've got to add this, access to general public, including wheelchair participants. We actually have rules for all wheelchair. I think it allows 2 bounces. It makes it easier for the wheelchair people to play, which makes it kind of interesting. Threats, lack of coordination and funding, lack of understanding and appreciation of benefits of offering pickleball facilities. Getting almost to the end here. Financial costs. Costs. Paving and a non-slip tennis surface. You pretty well have to have a non-slip tennis surface when it plays wet and things like that. And permanent nets to create 8 courts. Approximate cost is $140,000. The estimate does not include excavation, drainage, storage facilities, or electrical. These costs were going by phoning different people to find out what the current charges were. The variable big one was excavation, because the paving companies, they don't know necessarily what's under there for the cost. Under the funding, OPC would be honored to contribute $9,000 towards this project. Projected timeline, October approval to build 8 dedicated, November the 1st commence construction, April the 1st completion, we have hopes, and May 1st unveil the new permanent facilities. Conclusion, building 8 dedicated pickleball courts will be a true asset for the community of Oceanside, both to its residents and to its many tourists. Thank you for your consideration of this very worthy project. Any questions?
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive presentation. Much appreciated. Members of council, do we have any questions for the delegation? Councillor Burton and Councillor Beale.
I understand that you've made some inquiries at the community center to use their facility, and I'm wondering how that's going.
It's actually doing very good. It really helps because that's during the wet season, and it makes it very handy.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you. I see that you have an estimate. You had an estimate for cost. Has the club had any direct conversation with staff about possible location for such courts or anything like that for you to come up with a timeline and your costs as well?
What we've talked to Warren down in the park. We're trying to keep the location variable by the study that's come in. The park study is the location, but we're going to a little sideline here. We don't want to vote on the location, but we find with excavation can be done, if it can be done during the winter, that's why we're trying to push a time during the winter. If we can do the excavation during that time, but the city, we save quite a bit of money. And we were hoping it would be done in the existing tennis courts because they have to be torn down to get under the roots and that anyway. And they could fit in there.
I have a question for Mr. Figuera. Mr. Figuera, at this point in time, has there been any consideration of expanding this facility, looking ahead to budget considerations?
If I may, Your Worship, through Councillor Beale. I'd like to point out that as part of the Community Master Plan process, the authors of that document, which is underway at the moment, have interviewed and talked to the 3 pickleball groups that we're aware of. And we expect that that document will be finished this year. Yeah, including a public process in October. Including a public process, and we expect some comments regarding pickleball will be coming out in that for the public to get involved with.
Follow. Go ahead.
Yes, I was also going to add that the Community Park Master Plan is coming up, so thank you, Mr. Figuera, for addressing that, and that's October 2nd, and then following up from there. So I'm certainly thinking about pickleball as well when that time comes to look at that, and following that, our budget proceedings will be starting. So good timing for the presentation, I'd say.
Are you telling us tonight that for the wet season you're okay with the PCCC and other gymnasiums? And you have enough? Because how long is the dry season? How long does the summer season last? From April through to September, October?
Well, we're obviously hitting the wet season right about now.
Yeah.
But usually we start, what, May the 1st? May the 1st. May the 1st is when we start. But going to the rink really helps because when it's wet, we go into the rink and that. There's a charge, but it's a great facility, and they've certainly done very well by us, yes, for the wet season.
So what I'm getting at is the use of these courts would be what months?
Well,
May through September?
Well, with the if it's dry, meaning that with the all-weather surface and that, and if we have squeegees and rollers, it makes it longer, a lot longer. You can always do it all year long as it's not pouring rain.
What about a light rain?
We get a lot of that, that's for sure.
Well, you know that I think Councillor Beale talked about your timing. We're going into budget discussions in a few weeks. We're getting I would have thought you and I met this summer, and I was expecting VIU to do the presentation this evening, but they're going to be doing it at the next council meeting, which is the night of October the 2nd. So I would urge you to attend that because we're going to be looking at the Community Park Master Plan and looking at all other areas that might be worthwhile. Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on the notion of sport tourism, I just want to share with everybody. I was on a plane today. I arrived this afternoon in the Comox plane from Edmonton, and probably half that plane was full of hockey players coming to this city for the Panthers hockey tournament that they have here. So the potential to attract people to our city through sports tourism is something that we should very seriously consider providing the infrastructure for. So I certainly support the notion of increasing those opportunities. I'm not sure if we can meet the timelines that you've presented here tonight, but I certainly believe that we need to get in line with these other places that have these permanent facilities, because I think it is a major attractant to the city, and it does open a lot of opportunities for a lot of ages.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation. I sit on the liaison for the Parks and Recreation and Commission, and so was very much involved in the survey. And I was amazed by the amount of participation and the amount that pickleball has grown in the last 5 years. And just if you could correct me, it's also going to be part of the BC sports added to the senior.
It already is. It has been for the last 3 years.
And
yes.
that's so. And Parksville has applied in the past for some of these games, so it would be really great to think about having some other courts and everything to show up on that application.
You know, I think we've started on a journey tonight. I think it's a very important journey. It's a journey towards pickleball heaven, I hope. And I want to thank you. As I said, we're going to listen to what VIU has to say about our community park, and we'll get into budget deliberations sooner than later. We now know what kind of monies you're looking at, and we'll be dealing with staff to find out some of these other things that haven't been accounted for. It's to get some sort of a total number of what we're looking at.
So just one last. I'm sorry. Just one last thing. We know there's $120,000 set aside. We're glad they put our $9,000 in there. We just didn't know if there's enough money right there if that meets what's needed for that. That's the main question to him.
Okay. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
So what if solution?
Pickleball. How many? Okay.
Oh my God.
Let's have a contest after that. That's a good point. Anybody want to make a motion? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're on reports. The first report of the evening is the consideration of a temporary change to the liquor license for the Parksville Curling Club, 193 Island Highway East. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beale. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on this issue regarding the liquor license extension for the Parksville Curling Club? Fairly straightforward.
If I may, Your Worship, for council consideration, for the last 11 years, the Parksville Curling Club amends their liquor license on a temporary basis to increase capacity. This is to allow for special events such as bonspiels, championships, and a camp. The listed change in hours, the change in capacities and the dates of those to occur are listed in the report, and the recommendations are per the agenda.
Straightforward. Any questions for Mr. Russell? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. So once again, Mr. Russell, I need a mover and a seconder for the consideration of a development variance permit at 429 Craig Street to relax setbacks in order to facilitate an accessory carriage house. I have a mover, Councillor Beal, a seconder, Councillor Powell. Mr. Russell, please give us the background on this issue. And when I've done this, I'm going to be asking if anybody wishes to speak to this particular motion. Mr. Russell, if you would, please. Pickleballers got you all confused.
So we've proceeded with notice for this variance request. There's two variances involved. This variance will allow for an existing building to facilitate a legal carriage house inside of it. And in order to facilitate it within its existing footprint, two relaxations are required, one to the rear lot line and one to the southern interior lot line, the details of which are in the report. We've done notice. As of today, we have not received any written correspondence. So now it's just if there's anyone in the gallery whose property may be affected, they could then speak to it upon your instruction.
Thank you. And before I go to members of council, are there any questions for Mr. Russell? I would like to know if anyone in the audience wishes to speak. And I'm going to ask them, if you do wish to speak, to come forward to the microphone, give your name and civic address. I think I only have to do that once, Mrs. Keller. Just once? I don't have to do it 3 times, just once? Okay. So I don't see anybody coming to the microphone. So members of council, do we have any questions for Mr. Russell? Once again, fairly straightforward. If there are no questions, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the recommendations? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. Once again, Mr. Russell, this is your night. I need a mover and a seconder for consideration of the proceeding with notice for a development variance permit and consideration of a development permit to facilitate commercial development at 164 Alberni Highway and 113 Jensen Avenue West. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beal. Councillor Patterson, I'm sorry. I'm going to give it to Councillor Patterson. So, Mr. Russell, please, if you would.
If I may, Your Worship, we have 2 applications that are encompassed in this staff report. As the development permit is reliant upon the variances that have been requested, staff are recommending that notice go out and that consideration of the development permit be deferred until a subsequent meeting where those variances have been considered with notice to surrounding property owners. There's a couple options for council's a couple options presented in the report. Staff's recommendations are to proceed with notice and defer consideration of the development permit.
Questions for Mr. Russell? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure if this is the proper time to bring it up, but that would be considered redevelopment in the downtown core, so that would be whatever is there now. It would be remain the same tax for the next 5 years, regardless of what was built there. Is that correct?
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Powell, I'm not the entire expert on the tax bylaw, but I believe there is a rebate or a freeze for improvements to the land for 5 years for new developments or redevelopment of existing properties.
Any further questions for Mr. Russell? Going to be good to see that particular location redeveloped. Okay. Seeing no further, Councillor Beal.
Yeah. Well, there was something I had in mind, but then, yes, when you said that, I wanted to say it. I just say that I would like to say that I will be supporting this. However, I am disappointed to see that the proposal, as it is here, does not include any residential on an upper floor. That's all.
So, seeing no further questions, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the recommendations, that I can take them all, 3 recommendations. Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. The next report is the acquisition of Ermineskin lands. Before I ask Mrs. Kaler to give us an update, I wanted all of council to know that Councillor Salter called me and said, I support this 100%, so she wanted that out of the way right away. So, Mrs. Kaler, would you please give us the background on the acquisition of the property known as Ermineskin lands, and to introduce under the readings, for 3 readings, a bylaw to dedicate the lands as a park?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Council has worked for many years to acquire the tract of land legally known as District Lot 16 and commonly known in the community as the Ermineskin Park. An offer to purchase has been accepted by the Ermineskin Tribal Council and a deposit on the lands has been paid. As part of the agreement, the city agreed to dedicate the lands in perpetuity as parkland for the benefit of the community. And as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, there is a bylaw later on in this agenda which commences that process by requesting Council give 3 readings to the parkland dedication bylaw, and recommendations are per the agenda.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Kaler? Councillor Patterson? No? Okay. So I'm going to call the vote on that note, and that's all of the recommendations that we have. 2 recommendations. Pardon me?
You have to have a
But it's the. Oh, okay. I didn't get a mover and a seconder? Oh, how come? Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Beale. I'm sorry, I thought I had a mover and a seconder. Okay. All right, so I'm on the 2 recommendations that are stated in your reports. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is unanimous. And if you'll permit me a moment here, Council, I'd like to make a comment. It's my pleasure on behalf of the city to express our appreciation to the Ermineskin Cree Nation for agreeing to sell these significant lands to the city of Parksville. Over the years, the Ermineskin Nation has allowed our residents and visitors to access these lands for the enjoyment of the trails, natural environment, and wildlife. We are extremely grateful to the Ermineskin Nation. Also tonight, I wanted to point out there's a young man in the audience. His name is Christopher Stevens. He's sitting right over there. And I can recall Christopher Stevens coming to Council and making some very significant presentations advocating for the preservation of this region as a wetland and forest reserve for Parksville, as have others who are in the audience. In an earlier report, I'm going to quote Christopher, if I may. You don't mind, Christopher, if I quote you? Okay. The Parksville wetlands and the Ermineskin Nature Park together form a unique natural environment with high, distinctive, and regional threatened wetland and forest habitat, with high ecological watershed, outdoor recreation, ecotourism, development, and green infrastructure restoration values. That's a direct quote from Christopher. He further stated that these lands provide a key habitat for the rich assemblage of declining marsh birds. I know that Council will be hearing from Mr. Stevens. I've invited him to come to Council sooner than later to talk about this in the very near future on his evaluation on this all-important property for the citizens of Parksville. The resolution passed this evening by Council ensures the Ermineskin lands will be maintained as a park in perpetuity, and I thank you for that. Okay. Yes, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, for your words, and if I could echo a few of my own. Thank you. Like Christopher Stevens and the Murdochs and some other residents, Maple Glen and that I see in the audience. I've been on Council for 3 terms and over 10 years, and this is a piece of property that has Council today and councils of the past have always recognized its value to this community and the importance of it, of our wetlands and in our reservoirs as well. And I thank you for coming tonight on a very, I think, important day in our future of this community, and one that I'd just like to say thanks again to the Ermineskin Nation and for allowing this to remain parkland and be a part of the city of Parksville.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The other thing I didn't mention, but we take it for granted, that this is the beginning. Eventually, we're going to want to have information. What do you call them, Christopher? Explaining what the flora and fauna are there for, and eventually, when we develop more revenue over the years, there'll be trails and what have you, and benches, I would imagine, and things like that. So it's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to happen over time. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I'd just like to say on my own behalf, I think you came to the first term that I was on council. I've been on council for 12 years. And this says, you know what? We did it. And it was you that brought this forward so that we could recognize how important that piece of property was. And thank you very much. I feel really great that we're doing this tonight.
And the last comment from me, I almost fainted one night after Christopher's presentation that Al Greer could repeat the type of species of birds and all of that information. Just totally out of character. Okay, Council, moving along, we're at bylaws. We have 2 bylaws this evening for 3 readings. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Powell. And it's Permissive Taxation Exemption Bylaw 2017, number 1536 and 1537. So to be read 3 times. So if there's no further questions or comments, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. That is unanimous. We're now moving on to new business. Does any member of council have any new business? I'm going to start tonight with Councillor. Do we?
Well, 1537 is not taxation. 1537 is about in the property.
Is that on here? Oh, the second one. Okay. Yeah. What's the second one?
The second one,
Oh, to dedicate the land as a park, to dedicate it as a park? Okay. I thought I had done both of them together. So this is Park Dedication Bylaw 2017, number 1537. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any comments or questions? Yes, Councillor.
I just think it's a wonderful day.
Does any member of council have any new business? I'm going to start with Councillor Burton.
Not tonight, thank you.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. 2 items. One, I know that recently at a council meeting there was the topic of plastic bags came up just as something that would be food for thought for a future discussion. And there is an upcoming event being held in Qualicum Beach at the Civic Center, September 21st, Battle of the Bag. I imagine it'll be in the paper as well. And there's a documentary with speakers and discussion. So certainly an opportunity to get further information about the impact of plastics on our marine environment. So that's one thing. There's a 2 p.m. and a 7 p.m. Time, and that's September 21st. I also like to mention that this Saturday I attended the library board meeting. It was a very long and involved meeting, and we went over the proposed financial plan, which was adopted unanimously. We have, throughout the course of the discussion and prior to that, we have adjusted, the library board has adjusted the time frame for facilities upgrades. Our library is going to be getting some upgrades this fall, and there are many other libraries in the larger regional system that may have air quality issues or be in very poor state. So there's a long-term plan so that at the end of the time frame, all of the libraries in the system are up to a certain standard. So that time frame has been extended out by 5 years to lessen the burden on taxpayers. But nonetheless, with that, there still will be an increase of 3.9% over the previous budget, which translates to about $1.15 per capita. So a slight increase, but it will be felt, of course. There are many factors that contribute to this necessary increase, and one can get details on the financial plan through the VIRL website.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I attended the Parksville Downtown Business Association meeting, and our meeting that we were supposed to have has been being rescheduled because we couldn't make it. And the Polapalooza has already started. The Christmas plans are already started. There was a discussion about the Christmas lights on the big tree that are very dim, and the rest of the downtown looks great. I know I walked from the city parking here and walked over to the tree where the event was last year, and I ran into 5 or 6 people that really complained about the lights on that tree, that big tree that's got sad lights, yes. And so what we're thinking of doing, I'm going to put it forward, not tonight, but a motion to get lights that actually brighten up that corner.
Colored lights.
Yes.
Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got a couple items. First is some logistics. So I move that pursuant to Section 91K of the Community Charter, a closed meeting of council be held on Monday, October 23rd, 2017, in the forum at the Parksville Civic and Technology Centre, 100th Jensen Avenue East, Parksville, BC, to consider items and related discussions respecting to proposed provision of a municipal service.
Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. Secondly, I move that additional open meetings of council be held on Monday, October 30th, 2017, Thursday, November 16th, 2017, and Tuesday, November 21st, 2017, if required, in the forum at the Parksville Civic and Technology Centre, 100 Jensen Avenue East, Parksville, BC, for the purpose of budget deliberations.
I need a seconder for that. Seconded by Councillor Beal. Any deliberation? Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried unanimously.
Thirdly, I move that council reinstate the Monday, December 18th, 2017 meeting as a regular meeting of council.
Seconder for that. Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you. Anything else, Councillor?
On a totally different note, I move that staff undertake a public consultation process through an online survey and social media to receive feedback from residents and businesses regarding a citywide ban on the use of plastic bags.
Seconded by Councillor Burden. Any discussion on that? Councillor Beal.
I would like to speak.
Councillor Oates, you speak for.
Yeah, I think this is a topical issue right now, and rather than relying on other jurisdictions to provide input to us, I think it's important that we get some input from our own residents and the businesses, especially with the impact of doing this. This is something that should be carefully considered. I certainly appreciate the environmental concerns, but I also am sensitive to the economic concerns of the different businesses. So I think it's important that we not assume what the public want or what the businesses want, and this gives us an opportunity to gauge that feedback. So I'm looking for full support for council on this. Thank you.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. And question for Councillor Oates. Councillor Oates, did you have a timeline in mind, a time frame in mind for this particular survey?
No, I'd leave that to the discretion of staff, how long they thought would be appropriate time to leave it open. I'm sure they've conducted surveys and that in the past, and I've imagined that they'd use that as a guideline for this one to be. I'm sure it would be an adequate amount of time, though, but I don't know the exact amount, and I don't know the wording or any of those things, no.
Thank you. And is it understood or anticipated that there would be further information as to what the implementation might be? So for instance, if one is looking at a ban, I'm just curious that if I'm concerned that there could be different interpretations as to what that might look like. So I'm just wondering if there's any thought, or again, if the thought is to leave this to staff to provide information as to what might be proposed.
I'm simply proposing an avenue for the public to give their input on the notion of a citywide ban on plastic bags. Any information that the public would need to make that decision, I trust them to find that for themselves, as opposed to somebody providing them the information that's obviously maybe has a vested interest or has a particular decision that they have predetermined. This is simply a public consultation process. When I campaigned to be on council, one of the things I said was that I would listen to the public first before I made any decisions. I see this as something that's going to come on our radar sooner rather than later. I wouldn't mind having a reading from the public or having taking a temperature of the public as to what their thoughts are on a citywide ban on the use of plastic bags. That would be the information provided to them, that there's a consideration of a citywide ban, and what do you think of that?
Final follow-up?
Final follow-up. I certainly have no objection to getting input from the public. I would just like to see the addition that this be plastic bags at point of sale. I'm concerned that if it's left just at the term plastic bags, people may feel that this would apply to everything, and I don't think that that's generally how that is applied in other areas where it's proposed.
Just for council's information, and Councillor Beale has to leave for his work out of town tomorrow, so I'm having a meeting late tomorrow afternoon with Ann Skipsey, the councillor in Qualicum Beach, because they're discussing it there, and we're also inviting Sherry Plummer. So we'll be having that meeting tomorrow afternoon as a prelude to what we're doing. So, Councillor Oates, anything else? Councillor Patterson, new business. Pardon me? We voted on it. We didn't? Oh, I got caught up in the discussion. All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Burden. I got so caught up in the discussion I forgot. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be coming back to council with some more information in regards to youth engagement coming forward. There was a 40 in attendance last week and 6 that were very interested in having meetings with council and doing some presentations for council. So I'll be talking with Debbie Tardif as well and seeing what that's going to look like. I have a busy week. I have a ODCA meeting this week. That's the Oceanside Development and Construction Association and Parks and Rec. So I'll be following up at our next council meeting with how some of those meetings went. Councillor Burden forgot to mention that in front of the Parksville Chamber and Visitor Information Center that they've installed some park and gardening boxes and it's looking really great. And just as we're going into that fall season and bountiful markets of food and produce and everything, Parksville is really amazing for the amount of growth and things that have been occurring. And that's another one that students at Bolinas and some of the elementary schools and that I'd like to touch base and that on as well.
I think we're going to have a busy year at the elementary schools because I know that I think Oceanside schools are coming back as well as Springwood have asked to come forward, so we're looking at that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'll close up. I only have one item under new business, and that's council will be away all of next week at UBCM in Vancouver. I would imagine the city can do without us for a week. I don't think there'll anything staff will carry on. But we're looking forward to it. It looks like a very interesting conference, and there's a lot of interesting topics to talk about. So on that note, I am going to ask for a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Do I have a mover by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Powell? All those in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned.